I did end up actually taking out my motor. I felt it the whole pass. I didn't think it was a motor. Well guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys saw in the last video, when we finally got this car back to the track, it was sort of a one-hit wonder. And unfortunately, we did end up taking out another motor. During the launch, the car felt absolutely amazing, but it felt like every second in that pass, I was losing like 100 wheel. The car was getting slower and slower. I didn't think much of it. I was just trying to get the fastest time possible. And then I noticed a little bit of rod knock at the end of the pass. Now, Josh, everyone who was watching said they were hearing the car break up. And I obviously, as you guys tell in the video, did not let off. I did not notice the breaking up issue when I was behind the wheel. I don't know about you guys, but when you guys are driving a very, very fast car down the track, that is not what I was paying attention to. I was paying attention to keeping this car straight and getting the fastest pass possible. But unfortunately, I missed the breaking up noise that would have saved this motor if I would have gotten out of it. As soon as I crossed the quarter mile, we parked pretty close to where the quarter mile end. The car got turned off immediately, pushed onto the trailer. I did not drive it on this time. And this car has not ran since, but I know for a fact it was knocking. And then since then, I have not even touched the car. I dropped it off. It was a very late night. Just threw the car into the shop, and I have not touched this car since. So I think the game plan today is we're just gonna start off by draining the oil and see how it looks. Now, just to clarify, I keep getting these comments, only Remmy could take out 2 motors in 2 race days. Yes, I did take out 2 motors in 2 race days, but my old Stage X, this is the motor I took out last race event, I did 9 passes, or the car saw like 9 passes that weekend alone on this motor. But if you guys have been following for a while now, this motor has been in my car for almost 2 years, and this motor has seen so much abuse, from it being flooded, upside down cams, flywheel backing off, anything you can name, this motor has experienced and still lasted 9 passes. So yes, it did give out on my first track event, but it gave me such a long life. So that is why I was not too bummed out when this went out, even though this is a very expensive motor. And then I have had this spare Stage 5 at Josh's shop for quite some time now. So we obviously put that motor in this car to make this race event. But then I took out this motor as well. But as I've said, the car was breaking up and I did not get out of it. And a very high horsepower car like this, when you stay in it, it is almost certain that you're gonna take something out. So maybe if I wasn't such a newbie and rookie with drag racing, I would have noticed the breaking up issue, got out of power, and potentially saved this motor. But obviously that did not happen, and another lesson was learned here. But let's go ahead, start off by getting the car in the air, draining the oil, see how much oil is in there, because when I did check the dipstick after the pass, it was very, very low on oil. So I don't have hope that an oil change will save it. I did on that motor, and as you guys know, the motor was toast. So I'm expecting when we drain this oil, we're gonna have a good amount of bearing. All right, let us see how bad this oil looks. It's hard for you guys to see, but I think my oil container is getting a little full here. Well, from the looks of it draining the oil pan, it doesn't look like that much oil got pushed out into the catch can. So when I must have checked the dipstick, I must have been just exhausted not reading it right, because it looks like majority of the oil is in the oil pan. Maybe like a quart got pushed over. And here comes the E85. All right, now that the oil pan is done draining, we're gonna go ahead and cap it off, pull out the oil container, and see how bad this oil looks. What are your guys' guesses here? Do you think it's going to be horrific, super glittery? Is there gonna be big chunks? We're about to find out. And we got some gnarly chunks. Well, damn it. This sucks. Setting aside just the costs of putting a new motor in, new oil pump, stuff like that, it is such a headache just rebuilding the car, doing the same thing every single week. But hopefully this next time we're gonna put a good motor in this car. I'm going to be very cautious and it should last us the entire season. We were also pretty skeptical with this block as well. This was a spare kind of backup for a reason. One of the clearances was not exactly what we would have wanted it to be. I obviously knew the risk. I said, let's do it anyway. And unfortunately, it didn't hold up, which we knew would have happened. We were hoping to get a little bit more life out of it, but we got one hit at least. Well, one hit at even more reduced power. It felt like the slowest pass I have ever done, but yeah. But at least I told you guys I would make next race day, and I did make next race day, and I'm promising you guys again, I will be making the next race event as well. Like I've expressed to you guys, I absolutely have fallen in love with racing this car. As you guys know, I've been building this car for like 2 years now, and I've always run into issues, as this isn't the first car I've ever built. A lot of learning for me involved with this as well, but it's always felt like it's never going to end. And to finally see this car making it to the track and doing passes is the best feeling in the world, knowing that my car is there racing, but also simply it is the best feeling being behind the wheel at the drag strip. And I know it sounds cheesy, but when you're at the white, it is just you in this car. You're not thinking about anything else. It is so relaxing. It is the best like 10 seconds, at least for me, because I can't get out of the 10s. It is the best 10 seconds ever. And that's what makes all of this worth it. It is unfortunate though, because it is not the cheapest racing Subarus. Things happen. And obviously this wasn't a motor failure. This was 100% my fault. Both times with these motor failures, if I wouldn't have abused the motor how I did before, this motor would have given us a way longer lifespan, already longer than what it gave us. But yeah, this motor that is in the car right now, we are already kind of skeptical of it. And of course, I never lifted when the car is breaking up, and it just solidified that it was the last pass for this motor. So yes, we'd already drained the oil. There is a ton of bearing material in there, but I want to cut open this filter anyway and see how it looks. Devin has a very fancy tool here, so we're gonna cut this bitch open.
We got bitch boy here. Breaking this fucking car every goddamn day.
Fuck you.
How many times are you gonna cut your filter, Remy?
This is my second time cutting. How deep do you go?
Balls deep. Told you before, if I don't talk shit, that means I don't like you. I don't like you either way. There we fucking go, dude. Look at that O-ring. You don't want to save that O-ring for your next motor?
I'll save it.
Whole rod bearing be chilling in here.
I'll only get this.
Bro, how do you fuck up motor so fast?
Maybe my 7th.
God damn! Bitch! Let me fucking investigate this.
Well, as you guys saw, so much bearing material was in there and in the filter. It was less bearing material in the filter on this motor than my Stage X though, which I'm a little bit surprised about. So now that we know the damage pretty much, which we already knew before, of this motor, we're gonna leave this car together at least for today's video. The game plan right now is to separate the case halves of the Stage X and bring this out to Josh's shop, get it measured out to see if this Stage X is reusable. I don't know if we're gonna make it out to Josh's shop tonight. He is very busy, but at least I can separate the case halves, take a look at the rods. I'm 99.9% sure the pistons are good, but take a look visually, seeing what is good and what isn't good. I have hope that the clearances are still going to be good on the main lines here, and we will be able to rebuild this Stage X. That is obviously best case scenario, so I don't have to go out and spend a ton of money on a new Stage X. I can just re-bearing it and pretty much call it a day. I do have spare Manley H-beams and platinum Manley pistons I've had laying around for quite some time, but I don't really want to put those in because all the closed deck blocks are 99.75 pistons. These are 99.5 stock size drop-in pistons, but I do not want to use an open deck. A lot of power. I'm just playing with fire again. If I were to do that, I know I would inevitably crack a sleeve. I don't really want to go through this process again. I'd rather just do it right the first time and have a long life out of this car this season. So I think the best case scenario is we can rebuild the Stage X and get some life out of it. So I'm crossing my fingers that is going to be the case. I'll go ahead and get that motor off of the motor stand, get it placed on here and start separating it. All right, guys, it is a little bit later on in the day now. I was getting my Stage X separated, and normally my ass will always strip out just like one of these Phillips bolts. But this time I was able to get that plate off perfectly. The bolts are in perfect condition, but the plate, I normally never strip these, but my dumbass stripped 5 out of the 6. The bottom one was the only one I was able to get out. So as you guys can see, I've been sitting here for quite some time drilling each one out. All the threads are in perfect condition, so that is good. All I need is just different bolts that I could put back on, but everything is still intact. It just took quite some time to get 5 of those drilled out. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean up all this metal shavings. I don't really care for it to go inside the motor. And then take off the access points for the wrist pins. This one doesn't have a bolt, but you have 1 bolt on the back here and then 2 bolts up front. And then we can get to getting this block split. This is a pinned main block, so I have been told it is an absolute nightmare to separate. I feel like it can't be that hard, but I struggle with everything, so I'm sure it's going to be a struggle to get this separated. But I'm really, really hoping that the internals are good to use, besides the bearings. All right, well, we got all of the case bolts off. I forgot, I already removed most of this stuff because I transported a lot of my ARP hardware, because all of the case bolt stuff are ARP. I put it on the block that's in the car right now. So a lot of my job was already done for me. Right now, I just moved the crank, and as you guys can see, I have the wrist pins lined up on the cylinder 1 and 3. I'm gonna go ahead and get the pin out. And then once I get the front 2 wrist pins out, I will go ahead and hit it out with a 1/4 inch extension, one a little bit longer than this that I'll hit from the back side, and it will go ahead and pop out both front wrist pins. Now it's gonna be hard to see. If you guys have not separated an EJ block before, you have the access points on the back of the block as well. I have the 1/4 inch extension put through. You guys can kind of see where you guys see the light. It is on the outer ring of the wrist pin. I'm gonna go ahead and tap it with a mallet, and the wrist pin should just pop right out. So there we go. We got the front 2 cylinder 1 and cylinder 3 wrist pins taken out. We're gonna go ahead and rotate the crank so we can get the back ones. There we go. Now we have the wrist pins lined up on the back. Also, here's a closer look of how messed up my crank got. So even if this internals is usable in the case halves, I do have a new crank I can go ahead and slap on here, just because I'm sure this does not help with the balancing. Haha, almost got away from me. All right, there we go. The 4 wrist pins are removed from this block. All the case half bolts are removed as well. Now we should be ready to go ahead and split this block. All right, game plan here to get this block separated is I am going to grab my largest flathead, and if you guys see this indent hole in the block, you put your flathead in there and then you tap this with a mallet and it should start separating the case half. And as you guys can see now, we are now getting a separation from the block. So now I can go across the entire circumference and start separating it evenly. Now we should just be able to pull off one side of the case half and it should separate. Maybe a little bit more prying is needed. Ow. I don't know if you guys can see, the case half fell back with my skin. Ow. And there we go, we have a separated block. Hey, but at least our rear main is in perfect condition. Also, I lied, I was backwards. The rods I just gave the good old shake test to were for cylinder 1 and 3. But while we're at it with this case half, we're gonna go ahead and take out the pistons from 1 and 3 and see if they look reusable. A little aggressive. Well, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but as you guys can see, all of these rods move freely on the bearings like they should. But here, I think this is cylinder 2. It is very, very tight on the crank here. But we'll know how these bearings look in just a second here as soon as we get these rods disconnected from the crank. Well, good news, it looks like the pistons are gonna be completely fine to reuse, which I already anticipated being the case. It will probably need new rings and stuff like that, but I'd rather have to buy new rings than buy all new pistons. Right now, we're gonna go ahead and separate the rods. Well, there we have it, guys. We have the full rotating assembly disconnected, and I found our failure here. As you guys can see here, these bearings got a little messed up and ended up spinning a bearing on cylinder 2. Now, I don't know what I'm looking for to see if a rod is still good to use. There is no scarring on the rod itself. There's most definitely coloration. I don't know if that's normal or not. But tomorrow morning, I am gonna go ahead and bring Josh this short block with all the components. He'll be able to tell me if the rods are salvageable, if the case halves are salvageable, all the bearings are still in here. I would imagine that the main bearings would be usable. I'm not quite sure. Again, I don't know what is good, what's not. There is no scoring on any bare metal materials. So maybe all of this is salvageable. We will need a new crank here. Holy shit, I just noticed this. We broke our crank. I don't know if you guys can see that crack, but we split the crank. Never mind, I'm just being dumb. It looked like it broke the crank, but then I looked at cylinder 1's rod and there is no bearings on here. So we do have a failure on cylinder 1 as well. Here are, yeah, these bearings are absolutely hammered. Jesus Christ. I can't even get this other bearing off of here. This bearing got so hammered, I thought this was a main bearing because they have a little lip on them. But no, this is a rod bearing that got completely smashed up against the crank here. So I would imagine that this rod is maybe bad. I don't know, it's weird. I've never had a failure on cylinder 1 and cylinder 3, both rod bearing. Very interesting. I'll send some pictures and videos to Josh to see what he thinks of this. But there we go, guys. Here is what took out our first Stage X. Well, there we have it. I'm pretty hopeful that we will be able to get a good motor assembled from here. I already know I'm gonna need to have a new crank, stuff like that. Obviously new bearings, new rings. But I'm very hopeful that the case halves are good, the rods are good. I know the pistons are good. So I think we can salvage together and put back the Stage X motor, which would be absolutely amazing, so we can hit the track as soon as possible and have a long life ahead of us. But I'm exhausted. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Kind of caught you guys up with what was happening with the STI and why I only got one past the last track day. And we got to take apart the previous motor as well. And hopefully we can have a new motor put together very soon here. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.